Why would anybody make a beehive out of concrete? That's the question that was on my mind when I first got an email last September from Erin Higgins of the Shelley Hive Company. In her email, she asked if I'd be willing to try out a beehive that they've developed using concrete and let them know what I think. And I'll be honest, even though she sent me this email and she sent a follow-up, I honestly kind of blew them off because the idea seemed ridiculous and impractical. Concrete, at least what I think of in the sidewalk and my garage floor, is heavy. It seems like working with it for a beehive, especially if you might ever have to move that beehive, is just a ridiculous notion. But then, earlier this year, Shelley Hive Company sent me a package. And in this package, they had some information about their partnership with a nonprofit, Save the Bee initiative. And they also included a bottle of honey in here, and they included a couple stickers. But what interested me most about what was inside of this package is this. This is a little sample of the Autoclaved Aerated Concrete that Shelley Hive Company uses to make their beehives. And it's not like the heavy brick-like concrete that I was thinking of. It's a light material with lots of air pockets. The benefits of the material are, number one, it's long lasting. We're talking about concrete, so a hive that's made out of this may last your lifetime. But also, because it's an aerated concrete, it has all sorts of air pockets in there that provide a great insulating factor. So it's a durable material that is going to provide insulation, better thermal control for the bee colony within the hive. If you've been around this channel for a while, you know that I prefer to use Layens horizontal beehives, and my preferred beehive is an insulated beehive. So I am completely in favor of the idea of providing the bees a good thermal environment, simulating what they might experience inside of a hollow tree. So the insulating factors of the material interested me. The durability is interesting. It's not as heavy as I was thinking, although it's definitely going to be heavier than a typical wood beehive. But I finally responded back to Erin and said I'd be interested in giving it a go. I want to have full disclosure here. They offered to send me this hive to try it out. And some will say, well, of course you're going to give them a good review if they're going to send you a beehive. Well, that's not necessarily the case. I'm not going to tell you anything that I don't believe. So I'm going to try this hive out, let you know honestly and frankly what I think. To Erin and Bob's credit, they put no restrictions on me. They didn't even put the qualification that I had to make a video about this, but you know I'm going to. So they have given me complete liberty to be entirely honest about what I think about this hive. And I am really intrigued to get it set up and try it out. Now I will say, although I prefer the Layens hive, this is not a Layens beehive. Right now the only model they have is a horizontal long Langstroth. So I'm going to be moving bees from my Langstroth hive into the horizontal hive once I get it set up here. As a platform for this hive, I'm using a Hopkins hive stand, which is available on my website. It's built for a 20-frame Layens horizontal hive. I've added some boards on top of it to support this Shelley hive, which is longer and a little wider. I'm setting this up on a slope in my backyard, replacing a hive stand that I did have set up here. And it's just recently rained, so the grass here is wet, it's a little slippery, a little bit muddy. So hopefully, as I'm carrying these concrete pieces and getting this set up here on the slope, I won't break my neck. But putting it on this slope also gives the opportunity to try out the Hopkins hive stand, make sure that it's up to the task of holding up this heavy hive. Also, to test out the adjustable feet on it. So it's kind of a two-in-one trial. We'll see how everything works together. So let's get this Shelley hive set up. The hive bottom is the largest and heaviest individual piece of this hive. So once you get it in place, then everything else should be cake. The front is molded as one piece with 4 entrances, so it's a pretty familiar horizontal hive configuration. It's even got the entrance discs that I'm familiar with on my Layens hives, so very familiar here. One nice thing is that when they package it, they include a little foam insert in each of the entrances. And it's nice for shipping, but this may also come in handy for winter time to be able to block all the entrances and really keep cold air from getting inside of the hive. The hive parts are basically glued together, in this case using DAP Dynaflex 230 caulk, and then there's screws that will hold the front and back and the end walls together. So we'll get to those in a little bit. Got that down. Now that'll stay in place while we get the end walls in place. The end walls are labeled top right and top left for the other one, and labeled which side goes out. That's important because the outside of the hive is treated with lime wash and doesn't have to be painted. Now we'll use some screws to hold all that together. Shelley Hive includes the screws that are used to tie the front and back to the side pieces. And so it's these long screws, and uses a T25 bit to drive them. The hive doesn't include frames, but that's okay. I'll be bringing frames over from that hive, and I have some additional frames to fill in the space. It does include a divider board to establish the space within the hive, just as we're accustomed to doing in a horizontal hive, and it also includes cover boards to go over top of the frames. Now the lid is interesting, and I'll show you that now. One of the benefits of the aerated concrete is the management of the heat within the hive. They also include this piece of foam board insulation that goes over top of the frames to help keep the hive cooler in summer and warmer in winter. It has one reflective side. They recommend putting the reflective side up for summer and down for winter, but I'll show you what goes on top of this. The lid is in 4 pieces, 4 concrete sections, which for the size, it's surprisingly lightweight. These are going to go on top, just like this. And I'm planning to get those bees moved in here, so I won't put them all on here, but there's 4 pieces to cover this. You can cut that foam board so that you can open up the hive in sections. Then once you get the 4 concrete pieces on top, there's a metal cap that goes over top of all of those to help cover everything. Once the hive is enclosed, it's pretty much a concrete bunker. Let's go ahead and get the bees in here. I have not been in this Langstroth hive a whole lot lately. I checked on it earlier this spring. They were doing fine in there. They've had good traffic at the entrance. I've been a little concerned about possible swarm preparation, So I did lift up the boxes and look underneath the frames to see if I could see any noticeable swarm cells in there. Didn't notice that. I went ahead and added on a second brood box for a couple of reasons. Number one, to give them more space to hedge off any potential swarm inclinations they might have. But number two, the frames that were in that bottom box are some of the original frames from when I did the cutout that originally populated this hive. So some of that is some old comb, it's wavy comb, and it's just time to retire it. So we'll be using the frames hopefully from that second box. They should have brood and everything in those frames by now, and trying to retire those frames from the bottom box. The reason I haven't been in this hive much is because I knew that this hive was coming and my plan was to move those bees in here. So I've been holding off and hoping that they would hold off swarming long enough to let me get them moved. I'm going to put the bees in this end, so I'm going to go ahead and leave this entrance open, and just checking to see how stiff that is. That's not bad at all. And then the rest of these I'm going to close for now. So it's sized nicely so that that box fits right in there. You know, it seems like a person could almost work this out to use supers on this hive if you were inclined to do that. Alright, let's see what we got in this first box. I guess this is technically the second box, isn't it? Doesn't leave me a whole lot of space to work here, so we'll just set it up here out of our way. Scoop this box over. This was previously used comb, so it's not, you know, brand new white comb, but it was drawn out. Mostly nectar there. We may have to rearrange some of these frames because I'd like to put the brood down on this end. So far they're just using that box to store nectar. I do see some drone brood in here, for what that's worth. Maybe as we get to the middle we'll see more brood. So we got nectar and drone brood. Oh, there's some little bit of worker brood on there. You can tell most of that worker brood is down below. So we might have to checkerboard some of our frames from that other box, as much as I'd like to just eliminate them. Maybe we'll pull a frame at a time over here. First frame from over there is mainly pollen and nectar, but there are some empty cells. So they could definitely use those for brood. But I want to find another frame that might have more brood. Here we got a mix of some pollen and some brood. That may be a decent place to start. So our frames are going to start to get a little wavy after that. So I want to put them farther into the hive, any of the wavy ones that we use, so they'll be easier to rotate out earlier. Now we'll pull our frame that has some brood on it here. We'll put that in. So this one has some capped brood and larvae on it on this side. Same thing on the other side. So that's a pretty good brood frame, and we're getting into good brood frames here now. I'm going to double check this next frame in the bottom box, and that's also some decent brood comb, but it's getting old and dark. So we may use some of these brood frames later on, and the frames from that top box are a little nicer. Actually, this next frame in here is pretty nice and straight. We might pull it next after this brood frame, because this one has a really nice brood pattern on it. And it looks a little patchy on that side. They filled some of the cells with nectar, but looks real nice on this side. And there's a couple cups on the bottom, but no queen cells. I'm pulling this next frame from that bottom box because it has fairly solid brood on it. So I want to make sure to bring that over. I haven't really been watching closely for my queen. I probably should. If I find her, I'd would probably want to catch her in a queen clip in case I spot any queen cells, to make sure the queen doesn't go with the split. But if we see a frame that has real young larvae and eggs on it, then that's going to be my prime place to look for that queen. Pretty good brood on that frame, both sides. But that's all capped brood, it's all older brood. Looking at that next frame, I don't see as much capped brood on it. I don't know if there's any young brood in there, but I do see some nectar shining in a lot of the cells. I may need to just set my super off to the side here because I'm running out of space to work. So this next frame from the bottom box has some young larvae in it. Looking here to see if I see my queen running around anywhere. The comb is dark, but it's pretty straight, and they're still using it. I'm going to go ahead and include that frame. Well, this one also has some mixed brood, some older larvae, and some capped cells. Well, we got pretty good capped brood over on this side. That gives us 10 frames right there. This next frame looks like it may be mainly honey, or nectar at least. It is, it's got some pollen in there, but mostly nectar. And got a little cup on the bottom there, but no queen cell. This first one, I think we just had nectar. It was mainly all nectar. And actually starting to cap some honey on that one. So it'll go down here on the honey end. I remember this frame, looking at this box before. This is the one they've kind of chewed the heck out of that one. I don't know why. I guess maybe this is kind of starting where the wavy frame started, so they might have cut some of this out to kind of contour to that. But a little artwork on the part of the bees. So don't think I'm going to be including that one. Although having said that about the wavy frame starting there, this next frame is actually pretty straight and has a pretty good quantity of brood on there. So we'll go ahead and include that one. So this one's going into position 11. And this next frame is a little wavy and old, but I don't want to give up that much capped brood. So I'm going to go ahead and include it, but it'll be down in position 12, so I'll be able to rotate it out next year. If I remember right, I think this hive holds 29 frames. I could be wrong about that. We're at 12, we're about to the middle, so maybe it's about 24, 25. Now we're getting down here where this really wavy comb, old comb, you can see there's a gap on that end. They've got it really built out on this other side. So yeah, I'm not going to put that into the hive. There is a little bit of brood on there, but they've got lots of brood going on. Kind of a shame to lose it. What I could do, I guess, is set it way at the other end of the hive. The bees will probably tend to it until it emerges. Or what I could do is put this in the conversion hive to help bolster them. Now we've got 16 frames in here. So these first 12 frames, 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 are frames that all have brood on them. Now check that I think maybe the first or second frame are mainly nectar and pollen. And then these 4 frames are mostly all nectar with a little bit of pollen, as I recall, on this frame. Mainly all resources here, a little bit of resources as far as food resources here, and then brood throughout the middle section. This last frame from that other box, there's not any brood in there that I see. There is some pollen and some nectar, and well, I guess we got some brood right over here to the side, but that's mainly all drone brood. And the comb's a little wonky there, got a gap in between, kind of wavy, so we'll go ahead and leave this frame out. Good time to get that out of the circulation. Now I'm just going to take the box from that old hive location, bottom and all, and just set it here and get these bees shook out. This new hive location is just a few feet from the other one, but the entrance is facing the opposite direction. So this is going to be a little bit of an adjustment, and I'm hoping that the bees will start fanning at this entrance to draw in those foragers that come back to that original location. For now, we'll get the remainder of these bees shook out into this hive. This is that chewed up comb. And that's the last of the frames from the old hive, with the exception that we still have that super. So we'll just shake out this box. Now I've got some frames of just wax foundation, so we'll go ahead and put these in here, let them start building. Because these are deep frames, 5 frames should be the equivalent of 1 shallow super. And I actually will only put 4 in there because I want to use 1 to hold my divider board in place. And actually I want to put a couple screws in the edge of the divider board to give the bees a gap to pass under. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now I've got my divider board, put a couple screws in the bottom. We'll use our last frame to hold that in place. And there's our hive. Now we got these cover boards. They go right on top of the frames. I'm not crazy about that because that means the bees are going to propolize them to the frames. So it'd be nice if the cover boards were made to sit about 3/8 inch above the frames to give a little bee space. This also means I got to shoo those bees out of the way and clean these frames off. Now I'll take the frames from the super and shake them out in here. Not sure what I'm going to do with these right now. They're not capped, so it's not like I'm going to freeze them for harvesting later. At least not that I can tell. I haven't pulled them yet, but what I see from the top is not capped. So we'll see. But the bees I'm just going to shake out into the open end of the box here and let them find their way into the colony. So yeah, there's a little capped honey on there, but it's mostly open. The other side doesn't have any at all. And this is not all new honey from this year. This was a super I left on the hive over winter. So some of this may be reserves from last year. Some of it is surely stored up this year, just like the nectar that was in that second brood box. Well, we actually have a pretty good amount of honey on that frame. We'll see what we do with it. There's a little bit of brood on there. That's interesting. Although I didn't use a queen excluder, so it's not that much of a surprise. Now that's a pretty good honey frame. That one's almost harvestable. Might freeze that one. Next one, same case. Pretty good honey in there. That one's got some pretty good honey, but it's got a lot of uncapped cells too. Now we're getting down to pretty much all, well, there's a little honey on that side, pretty much all uncapped nectar on that side. And this final frame looks like a whole lot of nothing. Yeah, almost no weight to it because there's almost nothing in it. So now we'll put the foam board in place and get our lid on. I'm not sure how much overlap we're supposed to have on the end, but we'll see. A few little chips out of the edges on these, nothing that affects their functionality. Well, obviously I have a little bit too much overlap on that other end. There, so it kind of comes out flush on the ends with maybe about an inch and a quarter, inch and a half overlap on the front and back. So that gives a little bit of overhang, and really we could scoot it farther forward to give a little bit more of a rain cover. Don't know if that's necessary. Snug fit. That's good. Holds everything together. And this has protective film on it. We'll peel that off. My initial impressions of the Shelley Hive, well, number one, it's built like a bunker, and despite that, it was easy to assemble. It took way less time to put the hive together than it did to move the bees into the hive, but that may differ depending on your case. Of course, I like the horizontal hive layout, and one concern I've had with long Langstroth hives is the fact that I don't feel like the Langstroth deep frames really give enough space for the bees to store up resources for their cluster to overwinter. If this aerated concrete really does a great job of moderating the temperatures, then the bees may be able to get through winter better in this hive than they would in a standard Langstroth deep box. I do intend to replace the Langstroth hive that I did have sitting there with an insulated Layens hive. And I plan to put thermometers inside of each of those to see between the aerated concrete and the insulated Layens hive which does a better job of managing the internal temperatures. But so far, I like the Shelley Hive. I do think it's going to last, and my only complaint is that it's not built to leave a bee space gap between the frames and the divider board. So those divider boards are definitely going to get propylized to the top of the frames. Besides that, we've got our bees in it now, and so I will keep you updated as things progress in this hive and as I do comparisons between this and a Layens insulated hive. I want to give a special thanks to the members of my Patreon community who have put their backing behind this channel. It's a small contribution each month, but I really do appreciate your support. I mentioned my concerns about bees overwintering in a long Langstroth hive on the 9-inch deep Langstroth frames. If you're interested in more about how bees survive over winter, check out this video right here. If you've already seen that one, check out this one that Google has selected especially for you. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you next time.